Okay, welcome everyone. It's approximately 1 o'clock. This is the Board of Trustees of the Vermont State Colleges System. My name is Church Hines. I chair this board, and this meeting was duly warned to take place at this time as a special meeting on Monday, May 11th. I welcome everyone. This is something of a return to business as usual meeting. Our agenda is almost exclusively the nature of things that this board has dealt with on and off routinely for years. And it's a special meeting because we have a very busy day scheduled on June 1st, when actually all 5 of the standing committees of the board will be meeting on June 1st. And since there's been a bit of a hiatus, we wanted to have an opportunity for trustees to be caught up to speed more or less through the lenses of the three of those committees: Finance and Facilities, the EPSL committee, and the Long Range Planning Committee. The Audit Committee will also be meeting on June 1st. And in Chair Linda Milne's opinion, we didn't need to do a prelude to that meeting. And there'll be an extremely brief meeting of the Executive Committee on that day, primarily for the purpose of adopting minutes. But we will have extensive time spent with the Finance and Facilities Committee, the EPSL Committee, and the Long Range Planning Committee. So that will be the core of our meeting today, or will be those updates. We will also begin with approving a set of 5 board meetings reflecting the busy schedule that we have had in place over the past few weeks. An update from our Chancellor, a discussion about our search for a longer-term interim Chancellor, an opportunity for public comment, any other business, and then we will adjourn. I would like to ask Jen Porrier if she would now conduct a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to. Please unmute yourself. Janet Bombardier.
Here.
Thank you. Megan Kluver.
Here.
Thank you. Lynn Dickinson.
Here.
Thank you. Peg Flory. Okay. Dylan Giambattista.
Here.
Thank you. Izzy Gogarty.
Here.
Thank you. Adam Grinold.
Here.
Thank you. Bill Lippert.
Here.
Thank you. Karen Luno.
Here.
Thank you. Jim Masland.
Here.
Thank you. Linda Milne.
Here.
Thank you. Mike Pichak.
Hi, Jen, I'm here.
Hi, Mike. Thank you. David Silverman.
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Hines is here. Thank you. That's everyone.
Okay.
Minus Peg.
Any initial comments or questions before we get right into our agenda from anyone? Well, hearing none, we do have 5 sets of minutes for the board meetings dated April 11, 20, 21, 29, and May 6th. They have been distributed to us for our review. I would like to get a sense from the board whether you would like to adopt those minutes as a group, or whether you would like to take them one at a time. Lynn.
Well, all the group would be fine, Church.
Thank you, Jim. Lynn?
Well, I have a correction on the April 20th meeting. The minutes that are on the time on the minutes that we went into executive session says that it was 3:17 p.m. after we had taken a recess at 7:45 that went to 7:50. Obviously, there are no minutes of that, but then we came out of executive session at 9:20 or something like that. I suspect that was more accurately like 8:17 instead of 3:17. 3:17 was an earlier executive session.
Okay. Jen, you can work out a reasonable replacement for that time.
Yes, I will fix that.
Okay. With that, is there any reason to take these up one meeting at a time? Hearing none, could I have a motion to accept the 5 sets of minutes as distributed with that one minor change relating to the time of an executive session?
So
So-
moved.
Jim so
Second.
moves. Bill, were you seconding?
Whoever, I'll second if that's fine. Whoever beat me to,
Jen, you have a maker and a seconder?
Yes, I'll do Lynn moved and Jim seconded.
Okay, that sounds fine. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting these 5 sets of minutes, please say aye.
all right,
Aye.
Any opposed? Any not voting? Again, I would just point out for the record that if we look at the attendance for these 5 meetings, this board has been in virtual unanimous attendance for every one of these. For as busy a group of Vermonters as you are, this is absolutely extraordinary. Any board in the country would be envious of that level of commitment. Thank you. Chancellor.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to just give a quick brief update for folks, for you, and then also for people listening in. I met with the senior leadership over at the State House, obviously via Zoom, not physically at the State House, on May 7th. It was the Speaker, Senate Pro Tem, and leaders in the House and Senate of the Appropriations Committees and the Education Committees. They were, my read of them is that they were supportive of helping us out. They're still trying to figure out the budgetary end of things, and they're dealing with a lot of other stuff right now on their plates, including the unemployment situation. We're waiting right now we provided information to the State Treasurer's Office, and we're waiting, her office and her team are going to be looking through the data we've provided. And the State House has also hired an external consultant to look through that information. My understanding is that's on a relatively expedited schedule, that they will be looking through the financial data that we've provided. So right now, we still, it's been a month about, I think we had a meeting on April 11th. We still are obviously in a critical financial situation, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be getting assistance from the state to help us weather the immediate storm that we're confronting. In addition to which, we have already submitted a request to the Joint Fiscal Office for reimbursement for some of the COVID-related expenses that we've had, and a supplemental request, I believe, is going in today. So that would be, if we could get that money, that would be enormously helpful, because that would help us address the deficit that we're facing for FY20. So just by way of background, that's where we're at right now as far as the legislature goes. Looking ahead, we're going to hear a bit later in this meeting about what the individual campuses and colleges are doing to address the change that needs to happen. My take is that it's very clear the existing status quo cannot continue, and that if the legislature chooses to give us some money to help us weather what we're calling this transition year, the expectation is that we come out the other end of this year with a transformed Vermont State College system. So the colleges are beginning those conversations with their communities and their campuses in terms of the kinds of change that's required at the campus level. We're also going to be looking at changes and at the Chancellor's office level, and take a review in terms of the services we provide, and if there's a way for us to be trimming budgets here in the Chancellor's office as well. So that's an ongoing conversation. The other piece that I want to just float out there is it seems that at some point we need to also consider creating a system-wide group, a task force, particularly to focus on the educational piece. At some point, I think that conversation needs to happen at a system level, because I think it's very difficult for the individual colleges to make decisions around program duplication and, what are the core courses, programs that we offer that need to be provided for our students and for the state of Vermont, and how do we best provide education across the whole state, including in the rural parts of the state. So this is just something we need to think about, and who would be part of that task force, whether we should consider hiring an external consultant to assist us with that conversation. So that's something I just want to put out there. Obviously no decisions or anything have been made, but from where I'm sitting, it seems like there needs to be, in addition to the individual campus-based conversations, at some point there needs to be a system-wide conversation too, in terms of focusing on the educational piece. What's the education we provide? How do we do it? And how do we best deliver it? So I just raised that because I think it's something we need to continue talking about. The other piece I wanted to add was really just a plea for collegiality, for calm, and for constructive conversations moving forward. One of the challenges, I think, is that given the pressures everybody's facing, it's much easier to tear down and destroy and criticize than it is to build. And I think we have an opportunity here where we really need to start shifting from the mode we've been in to looking forward, and how best do we preserve the Vermont State Colleges and the mission of the Vermont State Colleges in a collaborative way. And I think to do that, we need to be focused on supporting each other, being positive, having calm conversations, relying on facts and not hyperbole and misrepresentations. And so I just put that plea out there. I'm not referring to you as trustees when I say this. It's more a collective message that I'm hoping we can project across the system. It seems there has been a considerable amount of negativity, and it really takes a toll. These times are super challenging with the pandemic and people being isolated, working from home. And when they read and see criticisms and endless negativity, it really takes a toll on the mental well-being of all our employees. And I just think it's important, sort of go back to what my mother taught me: if you can't say something nice, don't say something at all. So if you think you're going to say something that could be hurtful or harmful, then I would really urge people not to do it, and to think about trying to praise people and encourage people in what they're doing. So anything that folks can do to help us move in that direction, I would be enormously appreciative of, because I really think we have an opportunity here to create the Vermont State College system of the future and to really serve our mission and serve the students of the state. But the way to do that is for us to work together and not to tear each other down. So sorry to lecture. It's not really my favorite thing to do, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer questions rather than make speeches.
Thank you, Sophie. Thoughts and questions? Karen.
I'm not sure if this is the correct time, but I wanted Sophie to talk a little bit about the gentleman consultant that Joint Fiscal Office has entered into an agreement with.
Yeah, so I found out on Saturday that the Joint Fiscal Office has entered into a contract with Jim Page, who's the former Chancellor of the University of Maine system. I believe he left that position in 2018. And so he will be working on behalf of the legislature, but to also take a review of our financial situation and then prepare a report back to the Joint Fiscal Office. I know Steve, our CFO, spoke to him already this morning. I spoke to him briefly right before this meeting. So he's looking forward to working with us. He's provided Steve with a list of information that he would like us to provide. But my sense is it's quite a short timeline that he's going to be moving swiftly to provide that information to the legislature.
Thank you.
I'll just add that when Sophie and I were meeting with the leadership the other day by Zoom, we expressed a hope that whoever they bring in would be someone who would be familiar with higher education finance and know how to read our financial statements. And it would be especially good if they could find someone who had some familiarity with small rural public higher education systems. And Jim Page is all over that. That is precisely who he is. I know that over the years, there have been a lot of communications between Vermont chancellors and the Maine and New Hampshire chancellors because our systems have some important similarities. So I'm assuming that Jim has been part of those conversations. And I think we've gotten what we've asked for, and I hope that that will help us out. Anything else for Sophie? Yes, Linda.
I think I heard Soph say it, but as I listen to the news and look at insights, I'm hearing a lot from other colleges about they're beginning to plan for a fall semester. And so I wanted to make sure that we as a board were hearing something about the planning process for how we'll be addressing fall semester. I recognize there's a lot of uncertainty still in the air, but that almost makes it more important to be planning now.
So I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but I think that will be touched on when we talk about what's coming up for the EPSL committee.
Okay,
So
great.
there definitely are folks working on that, working hard on it. And yeah, so you'll learn a little bit more about that in a moment.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anything else for Sophie? Then why don't we get right to the core of our meeting? Linda, I just want to be sure that I was accurate when you indicated that you didn't feel that there was any need for preliminary sharing about the audit committee for June 1st. Is there anything you want to highlight for us before we move on to finance?
No, I know from an exchange with Steve, he's already making arrangements for the auditors to join us by Zoom or however, because that's traditionally the meeting at which we do the planning session with our outside auditors who will do the audit of the fiscal year end.
Well, it won't be as much fun as having them with us, but it'll work.
Exactly.
And as I mentioned also on June 1st, the executive committee will have, right now it's planned to be a very brief meeting for the sole purpose of adopting a set of minutes for its sessions. And with that, Steve, welcome to the screen. And
Thank you,
we
Mr.
look
Chair.
forward to whatever transitional summary or information you want to share with us. And this is also a good time, trustees, to be thinking about or jot down questions that whether you're on finance and facilities or not on any of these committees, if you have questions that you would like to have some attention paid to at the June 1st meetings, I think I can speak for the chairs of all of those committees. If you have questions, please share those with the chair, especially after we've heard the updates today, so we can make the very best use of our time together on the 1st. Steve.
Wait, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just note that Peg Flory has now joined us.
Welcome, Peg.
Thank you. My Zoom disappeared from my computer, but they just sent me a new one. Thank you.
Okay. They will get the bugs out because we are really smarter than this stuff is. It only feels like it's smarter than us now, but we will win. Stephen.
Yes, sir. So if I could just first confirm Linda's discussion about June 1st. So we are communicating with O'Connor and Drew. We will schedule and arrange for them to have their audit kickoff, which was postponed from our April 20th regularly scheduled meeting for June 1st, and we will commence it at that time. And they have been prepared to do that. And so I guess transitioning to finance and facilities, I guess I'd first like to echo, maybe pick up the baton from the Chancellor and really reinforce the idea that it's a good idea to be constructive. And I think we've got a fair amount, believe it or not, to be cautiously optimistic about. And maybe another theme that I'd like to assert is that, you know, we have a process and the process is there to help us. And so I'm really looking forward to June 1st as a resumption of the Finance and Facilities Committee's just regular course of business. You know, we haven't had a meeting since February 3rd, and there's quite actually a backlog of just regular business to discharge with. And so I think by way of update, I'd like to maybe just reference 3 buckets of work, if you will. And I hope we can address each of them at the June 1st meeting. And the first one is just, you know, routine operations. We do things like approve endowments. We have quarterly reviews of our cash and investments, our grants activity. We look at our facilities. We review our debt. We have any number of business policies, so the Series 400 policies, which require periodic updating, and to the extent that they are outdated, require review and waiver. And so I don't know if that gets people excited, but you know, we do actually have just routine business to discharge, and quite a backlog at that. I'd say the second major bucket is just our routine process and procedure and activity by which we monitor the financial health of the system. And so that would be our regular quarterly financial reporting. It would be our budget development process, which again, in a normal year, we would have kicked that off in earnest in February. We would have already had a couple of passes at our system operating budget as per policy 403 by this time. And we're going to just resume that process, albeit on a delayed basis. I will speak to, we actually just did complete our third quarter financials at the end of last week, and I will review those with you in narrative form, but then I hope to be able to do a detailed walkthrough with you at the June 1st meeting, along with what I hope is a first pass, or perhaps a pre-first pass at fiscal 21 budget development. And then the last bucket would just be the extraordinary activities that I think nonetheless fall under the aegis of the Finance and Facilities Committee and the Business Affairs Council of the system. That is my, you know, Chief Financial Officer, Dean of Administration counterparts at the colleges. And I think the Chancellor already referred to those, but just to recap, we are currently underway, have been for a couple weeks, with an assessment being conducted by the State Treasurer on behalf of the legislature of our financial condition, financial condition and outlook. And that's primarily focused on just the next 14 months. It's the rest of fiscal year 20, and then it is the balance of fiscal 21, given that there is a desire to maintain the system's current footprint. And what does that entail? There is then the external consultant, so former Chancellor Page of the University of Maine system. And again, I had a good conversation with him this morning, and a fair amount of deliverables that we have to pull together, but that will be easy. I mean, you know, almost all of the deliverables are part of the routine business of the Finance and Facilities Committee. And those that weren't were, you know, also collected. You know, if we had to kind of look them up, because maybe the last time we did a deep dive was several years ago, but those were generally collected as part of the work with the treasurer. So this is just routine business. And then the other effort, and I would like to tip my hat to everyone, because the presidents, the deans, my colleagues in the Chancellor's office spent the better part of Mother's Day weekend scrambling to get a second request to the General Assembly to try to access the state's coronavirus relief fund. We had submitted a memorandum last week. in connection with our roughly $5.1 million of room and board refunds. And no later than this afternoon, we will submit a follow-up, which has other enumerated costs, such as just extra cleaning or, extra equipment or salaries and benefits related to response to COVID or, canceled conferences at events. It's that much more dispersed and somewhat smaller, but still very significant group of expenses. And so, and that the deadline is pretty much today because that will go in the Budget Adjustment Act. But it is very encouraging that the state does appear disposed to include both our room and board refunds and some additional costs, which will go a long way towards helping us for the balance of fiscal 20. And so that is generally, the three buckets of work. There's just the routine business, then there's sort of the more significant financial reporting and budget development aspects of the Finance Committee's work. And then there are those extraordinary efforts that are primarily related to, relief specific to coronavirus at the federal and state level, and then our interaction with the General Assembly so that they have a thorough understanding of the costs related to keeping the system in its current configuration. So I will pause there for questions, and then I'll do a quick review of Q3.
Mike?
Thanks, Church. Hey, Steve, the only question I had was if you had an estimate of the dollar amount of that second bucket relating to salaries and equipment and canceled events and things of that nature.
Yeah, so we've actually done that, and I appreciate the way the colleges chose to look at this because it's a really continuum that goes into fiscal 21. And so we've broken it out into fiscal 20 and then fiscal 21. Fiscal 20 is between 2.5 and 3 million additional dollars above the 5.1. Fiscal 21 is north of 20 million. I mean, that is when you're getting to, really contemplating a full year of potential transition to rigorous remote development. It is, dealing with much less physical capacity if you have to enforce social distancing in the classroom or in auditoriums or on campus. Just all of the extra cost screening, healthcare costs, mental health support. So, marketing, admissions work. There's just a really potentially significant amount of funding, but that primarily would be around the fall 2020 timeframe. So we wanted to make the General Assembly aware of that.
Could you repeat those numbers again, please?
It's between 2.5 and 3 million for the balance of fiscal 20. And then it was over 20 million. I apologize. I should just, get the latest draft of the memo, but it was over 20 million for fiscal 21.
Bill, then David, did I see your hand as well? Right, Bill, then David.
Steve, the $2+ million for fiscal 20 was on top of the refunds. Is that incorrect? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we use a full figure because otherwise it'd be very easy for people to say, oh, it's not 5 million the way they talked about it, it's 2 million something. I think it's really, so I think the figure is somewhere around 7+. Is that correct, or is it?
Correct. 7 to 8 million would be the fiscal.
Yeah, I think that's important for us to be using that figure. Otherwise, I think it can easily get misinterpreted.
Yeah, I think it's 8+ when you go 5.6 and 2.5.
I didn't have the numbers in front of me, so.
No, but that is correct. And thank you, Bill. I will do that. I'll make sure that we're clear.
Thank you, Bill. David?
Just a quick question with regards to the deliverables for the consultant. Did you have an agreed upon time frame?
Before I go to bed this evening. That wasn't necessarily agreed upon, but that's what I intend to.
You're talking about today?
Today. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
I think time is of the essence.
Great. Dylan.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate something. Steve, thank you to you and everyone else who worked over the weekend. I know we have a big audience as this discussion continues, and moving quickly to make our proposal to the legislature for budget adjustment in this environment is critically important. And so I just really appreciate the work of everyone who has stepped forward to do that very quickly, because that's one of the financing trains that's leaving the station at the legislature, and we'll have additional opportunities in the future, but this is a very important moment. So thank you for preparing all that information. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that, Dylan. I think you speak for all of us. Okay. Steve, is there more you'd like to walk us through?
So just in sort of an executive summary presentation of Q3. So if folks might remember, for the second quarter, the period ending December 31st, the system was facing an approximately $4.2 million deficit, or about 2.3% of our $182 million expense budget to year end. At Q3, we were facing a $5.7 million deficit. So right off the bat, when you include $5.1 million of refunds and another $2 to $3 million of lost revenues, for us to have only deteriorated by about $1.5 million was very eye-opening for me in a good way. So $3 million of that is the anticipation of drawing CARES Act funding that is directly targeted to our 4 institutions. That specific amount is $3.071 million, and that is included. The presumption that all of that will be drawn by June 30 is included in the Q3 financials. But a lot of the rest of it is attributable to just a very serious effort on the parts of all the institutions to ratchet back spending. So all purchasing card expenditures were halted, supplies, services, travel, just pretty much anything that could be held was, and that actually really shows in Q3s. So, but a $5.7 million deficit to year end is still quite large. It would be bigger than anything that I've seen in my time here. However, if we were to receive 7 or 8 million in the Budget Adjustment Act, that would perhaps more than close the difference. And so then, and I think that there's been, certainly at my behest, a lot of focus on our crooked M charts and how much money is left in our concentration account balance. But what that would do in cash terms would be to put us well into the summer before I would be worried about us hitting our money market funds, which again, we have not had to do since January of 2016 when I've been here, or heaven forbid, have to tap some of our reserves. So what it really does is allows us to focus on the work in progress that is fiscal 21. Again, all that remains to be seen. As Dylan referred to, that Budget Adjustment Act train is leaving the station quickly and we need to jump on it. But if that in fact is, if the Coronavirus Relief Fund can provide that reimbursement for a lot of our direct COVID-19 expenses, which were extensive, we may just about be balanced in fiscal 20, or maybe slightly better. And that is a far better story than I ever would have expected even a week ago, and certainly not a month and a half ago.
Cool. Very good.
Bill?
Steve, you indicated that the deliverables for the analysis by the Joint Fiscal Office's consultant, it says Mr. Page, am I correct, from Maine, that you're going to get the information to him today, if possible, but very shortly thereafter, if not. What is his turnaround time? Do you know? Has that been indicated for him to make a report to the Joint Fiscal Office and the legislature?
So my guess, well, what I understand is it is not more than a few weeks. I did happen to see the engagement. I don't know if it was the signed engagement, but it did refer to deliverables in June. My sense is that was early June, like at the latest.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just was going to add, my understanding is that the senior leadership at the State House wants that turned around obviously have him do his job, but turn it around swiftly. And I think his goal is to do it, my sense is within 2-3 weeks. So that's not written down anywhere. That's just the impression that I have, that he's looking at a short turnaround time.
Thank you.
From where I sit, the selection of the consultant by Joint Fiscal, who of course is a service arm for the General Assembly, and the request that essentially said when it came to COVID-19 funds, isn't there more ways that we can help you, is just further evidence of the General Assembly right now paying very close positive attention to us. And that is something that feels mighty good. So I appreciate, Steve, everything that you're doing. You did refer to the crooked M chart. We do shudder sometimes when our CFO uses the term crooked in public testimony. I'm sure you're referring strictly to the shape of the chart.
That is correct. It is merely that the right-hand side of the M in the spring is a little bit higher than the left-hand side of the M in the fall.
Just in case anybody wondered. Any further things, Steve? You have the floor. I'm not rushing you. I'm just asking.
Honestly, Mr. Chair, I think that's about it. I'm looking forward to a very productive, albeit probably lengthy, Finance Committee meeting on June 1st.
Okay, for just looking ahead to June 1st, I anticipate, and Sophie will work this through with the presidents and with others. I'm imagining that we will be meeting maybe one committee before lunch and the other committees after lunch, so that no committee feels constrained for time. I hope we won't have an afternoon and evening session, but I would not be surprised if we have, 10:30 to 4:30 sort of session on that day. And as soon as we can get that information out to everybody for your own schedules, the better. So that, again, each of the three committees has so much on their agenda. We don't want to stress them for time. Bill.
Mr. Chair, is there a board meeting scheduled for that day as well? Or is it strictly the functioning committees?
The 5 committees of the board will be meeting.
Thank you.
The board meeting is scheduled for June 17th, I believe. Is that right, Jen?
That is correct.
So a board meeting about 2 weeks afterwards, unless we need one sooner.
I think it may be scheduled for 2 days, isn't it? June 17th and 18th?
Yes, it was initially scheduled for that, and there's some question as to whether the board's interest is having 2 days of Zoom or a single day of Zoom. It might have made a big difference if we were going to be all together. Although I guess we all could pour a cocktail at 5 o'clock and stay on Zoom together that way.
Yes, it was supposed to be at Vermont Tech for 2 days, so.
Right. I have a feeling that Michael and his colleagues from Monday, Wednesday, Friday would frown on us all being together in a couple of weeks. Our group is probably a little bigger than they feel comfortable with.
And we'll spend a lot of time with each other.
Okay. Sophie, where do we go next?
Next is talk about the EPSL committee, and Yasmin is going to lead that.
Okay.
There she is.
Here I am. Yes, so like the Finance Committee, the EPSL committee last met February 3rd. Obviously, academic work and the work really of everyone across our colleges has been impacted by COVID, but we do have regular business for the committee that happens regardless. So I just want to review briefly some of the things coming up. And for those of you who might be joining the board meeting and listening, EPSL, we tend to use that acronym a lot, but it stands for Education, Personnel, and Student Life. And so In the first bucket of education business, we have our regular policy, board policy 101, which we refer to as the 3-step program improvement process. We will have a written report from an external reviewer for the committee to look at. On June 1st, there's been a lot of good work here, and we have updates on where we see that going forward. And then another piece of regular business is the board's policy 109, which talks about an annual review of program enrollments. So we'll have an update for the committee on that. And then finally, it's the time of year when we appoint VSC faculty fellows for the upcoming year. So those are some of the regular business on the education front. On the personnel front, certainly I actually am going to turn this over and introduce for you. Oh, and she's on screen. Katrina Meggs, who's been working here in the Chancellor's office in a project management capacity on our implementation of the UltiPro software. And she's been working really closely with all of our HR directors, particularly since we've been dealing with COVID-19. So I'm going to turn it over to Katrina to give you the update on UltiPro and our HR kind of responses.
Welcome,
Hi.
Katrina.
Thank you. So I'm excited to say that we finally have the right people in the right places within UltiPro, and it's allowed us to make tremendous progress. You know, we've transitioned from working from a reactive state to a proactive state, which is a great feeling. We instituted a ticketing system where employees could send tickets if they had a question. We were able to resolve those. This morning when I checked, we had 11 open tickets, and we typically get we've gotten, I think since we opened it in February, we've had about 450 tickets. So you can see we're able to respond in a much more timely fashion. As it relates to COVID, we've worked really hard to respond appropriately and quickly to sort of all of the challenges that COVID-19 has posed to us as employees, to us as employers. We've established ways to keep our employees supported and whole. Our employees collectively created their own sick bank. So this is across all of the unions. They created a sick bank for those in need, which I think is an amazing feat. And we also have started to track all of the time that we've used related to COVID. Some of this ties into what Steve spoke to earlier, with the hopes that, you know, there may be future reimbursement around this. So multifaceted pieces around this COVID piece as it relates to human resources.
Great, thanks, Katrina. And so to kind of keep going on the COVID theme and to get to Linda's question about plans for the fall, certainly both on the academic side and the student life side, we're already moving forward to thinking about the fall in terms of academic delivery and having a plan B, plan C, given, you know, not knowing exactly how the fall semester will go, but certainly hoping. And you'll hear, I'm sure, more from the presidents on this. And similarly with bringing students back to campus and thinking about some contingency ways. So we'll have a more detailed update on that for you at the EPSL meeting. And then the final, there are a couple pieces of business that we'll talk about both at the June 1st meeting, but that we're also actually, just to kind of put it on everyone's radar, anticipating needing one additional meeting by EPSL before, well, around early August. And the reason for this is that if you followed in the news, Betsy DeVos, Secretary of the US Department of Education, has issued new regulations related to Title IX that essentially reverse a lot of the Obama administration's approach in some critical ways. And so that's going to impact our work and particularly our policy 311, 311A. And we have a couple other pieces in the works, and I'm going to turn it over to our interim general counsel, Todd, to give you just a little bit more feeling for that.
Welcome, Todd.
We can't hear you, Todd. Todd, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was double muted just to be extra careful. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Yasmin. I don't have a lot to add to what Yasmin just said. I think mostly I want to get on the board's radar that based on the new regulations that came down last week, we will need to make some updates to what the board understands as policy 311 and 311A, which are specific policies that are VSC wide. 311 focuses on discrimination and certain forms of harassment broadly, including discrimination based on gender. And 311A focuses more on activities such as assault, stalking, and other forms of harassment. Both of those policies touch where Title IX regulations fall, but the new Title IX regulations that have come out of the Department of Education will require us to make changes in the procedure under which we investigate and adjudicate claims of violations of Title IX. And so within the coming weeks and months, we'll be putting together another policy, determining how to make it best dovetail with the existing two policies and bring it forward first for EPSL's attention this summer, and then for the full board's consideration in advance of the August 14th deadline that the administration has set for implementation of these changes. So it's a very tight timeline. And the changes are fairly significant in terms of the procedure provided for the parties involved in a claim of a violation of Title IX. But we will make our best efforts to put together a policy that continues to track with the values that the VSC holds and complies with the regulations as they've come down. Likely we'll be working with outside counsel to get that done purely on a capacity front, but also to ensure a level of consistency with our sister institutions, both in the region and across the country.
Sounds like a lot of work, Todd.
Jim, all right, there's more light in the summer.
Jim, then Michael.
Yeah, Todd, briefly, when you said deadline, the administration set, I presume you mean in Washington?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Hey, Todd, do you anticipate any legal challenges, either based on the substance or the process that the Department of Education used to implement this regulation? And what's sort of the penalty if a college doesn't comply with the August 20 deadline?
I do anticipate that various groups, including industry groups within higher ed, but also other entities, will challenge the regulations. Whether those challenges would be pre-enforcement or after the August 14th deadline, I wouldn't opine on that. But my personal opinion and recommendation to the board would be that we move forward anticipating that the regulations will come into full force and effect, rather than relying on an injunction from the judiciary that may or may not halt the process or delay the process. It is certainly possible that we will put in time and money to regulations that ultimately don't come to fruition, but I would recommend that we attempt to comply with the law rather than assuming we might not have to. Beyond that, the penalties for not compliance with Title IX or these regulations begin with the joys of a full-blown Office of Civil Rights investigation into your organization. And I use the word joy sarcastically. It's a not pleasant process. It is time-consuming, challenging for the organization, and ultimately can result in fines and penalties.
Interesting. And the only reason I ask is I know there's some controversy around these, and just wondering what the full scope is there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely tight timeline to implement pretty broad sweeping regulatory change in a system that has been somewhat set, though not without controversy, for a good number of years now. From our perspective in the General Counsel's office, you're looking at really over the last several years having hit our procedural stride. Our campuses understand how to respond to these. Our campuses are good at both educating students and reporting any claimed violations of our policies. We do a good job investigating to the best of our ability and adjudicating to the best of our ability. And I think this will simply likely add a new overlay of complexity, and there'll be a learning curve.
Todd, between now and June 1st, if there is something that national groups or anyone else puts together that would be kind of a lay version of what we have now versus what the new ones are, that would be suitable for trustees or any university governing group to better understand what the changes are, I think that would be appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yasmin, back to you.
Yes, so just one last note on policies, and I believe EPSL heard about this a little bit on February 3rd, but classroom recordings, as we are now all in this environment of doing a lot more with video, putting a system-wide policy together on classroom recordings was already in the works, and so we definitely want to bring that back to you. Again, probably that's going to be a little bit more meat than we have time for on June 1st, but anticipating an additional EPSL meeting in August, we will have it ready then, and that will, you know, also further support whatever we're doing at that point in whatever form we're conducting our academic operations for the fall.
Okay.
And that is it.
I have one question that I think relates back to both Steve and Yasmin, and I don't think Steve mentioned it. I believe that a portion of our federal COVID-19 monies are designed to be spent for direct student benefit.
Correct.
Versus institutional benefits. Can one of you kind of explain to us what that means and how it might play out for students?
I can give you the dollar amount. I don't know, Yasmin, if you're a little closer to the direct uses of it.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I think, and I believe, but our presidents could maybe give even more detail, or our deans of administration, that we are pushing send on some getting funds into the hands of students, really targeting students receiving Pell Grants, because that was kind of the focus of the funding. So I believe we're very close to getting that out to people. Again, maybe someone else can jump in with more detail. And Steve, go ahead with the
Just yes. So what we're colloquially referring to as CARES Act funds, which were directly tied to our 4 institutions and totaled $6,142,000 at the system level. That was split 50%, 50%, or $3.071 million per. Half towards what we would call general fund applications at the colleges, and half that needed to be remitted directly to students.
And some examples of perhaps what types of student needs would be paid for?
Yes, so this is kind of a direct pass through of money to students. My understanding is the campuses are designing a rubric around, sort of how are they identifying what those amounts are for students? Yeah.
Bill.
Oh, Bill, sorry, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Steve, just for clarification, the 50-50 split is something that is not our choice. It's a direct, it's directed through the CARES Act.
It's a mandate.
Yeah, it's a mandate. So I think folks need to understand that that is how the federal government chose to apportion the dollars coming to higher education, at least in that grant.
Great.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I like, actually, your use of the word grant is very instructive, because we do need to track this money as if it were a federal grant. And for that reason, we actually have our grants administrator heavily involved. We will need to report this as part of our schedule of expenditure of federal rewards in our audit.
Okay. But some good news for some of our students.
Yes.
Okay.
With the intent really being to support students to be able to know that they can count on continuing their education with us.
Okay. Good. Anything else for Yasmin or Steve? Jim?
Yeah, I'm just curious, given the restrictions on how we can use the money, are we confident that it'll all get used in one way or another and appropriately?
I guess I could say with respect to what I'd call the general fund application, and I am educating myself every day on this, but I'm also confident that there are at least 24 people or more at the VSC who know a fair amount more than I do about the particulars of it. But a very good thing about that CARES Act money is it is expendable for a year. And
Okay.
so it has one of the longest fuses if you look at the pots of money that are available. And so notwithstanding that we are reporting it as though we will utilize it all by June 30th, as we get a better picture on which, amounts of funding are available and from where, it may behoove us to be deliberative about this CARES Act money and instead deploy it in fiscal 21.
Thank you. My only sideways comment is when JFO comes to talk to Ways and Means, it seems the CARES money that we can use in state budget, state education seems to get more complicated every time there's new guidance. So best of luck.
Thank
sir.
you.
Ma'am.
We're focused on that.
Thank you.
Great.
I would just echo what Jim just said. I mean, even the money that's allocated for the students, when it first came out, it was very unclear which students it would apply to, and the assumption was that any student could receive it. And as time went on, more regulations came out and limited it. So it was not international students, it wasn't DACA students. So that has been the experience that we've seen, is that, the money was provided, and then later it was more and more rules and regulations came in around how it was being expended.
Hey, Church.
Michael?
Just one clarifying question, Yasmin or Sophie. Is the money for current students currently enrolled, or is there some sort of incentive that can be created for new students that are looking to come to Vermont State Colleges next year?
I've seen published questions about whether even current students that are graduating would be eligible to get it. So that's become an issue as to whether, in fact, students that have already wrapped up the semester will be entitled to get it. As far as new students, I haven't seen anything on that, so I don't know. I mean, my sense was it really was the students that were directly impacted, when COVID hit. But as Steve says, if there's a long, tail on it, then, if there are students that would be coming in the fall that have expenses, it may be that they can use it too. I just don't know on that. I haven't researched it, but I have seen people questioning whether a student that's graduated is able to now access it. So again, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the money and how it can be spent.
Sophie and Mike, this is Joyce. I can tell you that students who are registered for the summer can apply. So we're in the middle of summer registration, and students can, either if they've been a student for fall or if they're planning to register for summer, there's very clear guidance that they can be for summer and for fall. I mean, for spring and for summer.
Great.
Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
Very good. Anything else for Yasmin or Steve before we transition? Okay, Sophie?
All right, for the long range planning piece, the president had specifically requested an opportunity to talk directly to the trustees about what they're doing on their campuses right now with regard to planning for the future and transition. So my thought is really just to turn it over to them and let them share with you what they're up to, and starting with Elaine and NVU.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair Hines. We are in the process of creating a committee. It is called the NVU Strong Task Force, and it is comprised of 16 members in our community. When we are talking about our community, we are including faculty, staff, students, student families, alumni, and community members. We've had over 286 nominations submitted. And from those, we have chosen our 16 members in this committee. This committee will be chaired by our provost, Nolan Atkins, and we are looking forward to accomplishing some significant work. To that end, we launched the committee on May 7th. And at that time, what we did is we started talking about a number of issues that you see on the screen now. Specifically, we started talking about, we wanted a very clear statement of the problem. And so we began by talking about, obviously, COVID-19. That is one issue that is before us. We also went back and as a foundational document, we talked about some of the existing challenges that were facing the Vermont State Colleges system, such as declining demographics, although we felt that we had a response to the declining demographics by increasing our recruitment of students outside of New England. We talked about years of low state support. And again, I was heartened by the Chancellor's discussion this morning that perhaps we should be cautiously optimistic about some changes in this area moving forward. We talked about the excess capacity that we have in facilities, and we've currently been meeting with a variety of agencies and interested parties who may be interested in leasing some of our facilities. And then we talked about the increased disruption of traditional higher education. And with that, we understand that, the status quo is not what we need moving forward. So our next charge is to figure out how to sustain NVU for the future, how to right-size NVU in order to weather some of the challenges moving forward. And we decided that we needed to look at a potential budget reduction of 15 to 25%. And specifically, I know that the board has asked us to work within the current budget that we have, and that does not take into account any potential state or federal assistance that we hope to receive. So this is without that figure. But I wanted to be clear on how we kind of calculated the 15 to 25% figure. And it was based on adding together where we are currently in Q3. Then we added the COVID expenses that we are estimating, such as all the reimbursements to students, the residential reimbursements. And to that, we also are adding some of our current projections that have been impacted on the former chancellor's recommendations. So with those three kind of factors, we have arrived at this 15 to 25% budget reduction. But again, it does not take into account any potential state or federal assistance. From there, we wanted to be very clear about what the models needed to do in terms of the goals for the models. And you see all of those listed there. Again, reiterating the 15 to 25% reduction and I think it's also important to note that we do not anticipate cutting our way out of this problem. Another way to go about it is to generate revenue. So we are also considering many ideas in terms of how to generate revenue so that we meet our budget for that year. And I think that this will help us be in the best place for recruitment as we move forward in that 2021 to recruit for the 2021 fall semester. So there you see in front of you all the goals that we have for this particular initiative. And then scrolling down a little bit further, I wanted to, although I'm not going to share exactly, the direction, because tomorrow is actually the first time that the task force will get together with Provost Atkins. I am serving as a resource to the committee. The final recommendations will come to me, so I just want to be at present serving as a resource. But here what you see are paraphrased examples that have been submitted by either faculty or staff, community members, parents, alumni, some of those stakeholder groups that I mentioned earlier. And we noticed that our ideas primarily came in 4 major categories. You see ideas as to how to curtail costs or address issues related to academics, others related to facilities, others to the types of partnerships or collaborations that we can engage in, others involving funding, and then finally others that couldn't be put in one particular category. They could have spread across multiple categories or been a unique idea altogether. So that is where we are right now. We are, our meetings will take place largely in the month of May in preparation for the board meeting on June 15th. And by then we are hoping to have a more, a specific model for you to consider that will include recommendations both on the expense side, on the revenue side, and a model that we feel will position NVU to succeed for future generations. I'll stop there to see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Elaine. Reactions, thoughts, and questions from the trustees. And I can't see everyone, so you may just have to speak up. Jim, I can see you.
Yeah, Elaine, that looks like a lot of work in a short period of time. So it's impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen?
You're muted, Karen.
I said Godspeed. It's an interesting and impressive roster. And I'm glad people will have the opportunity to discuss this. Hope something good comes out of it.
I'm very excited by all the people and all of the community support that we're getting. Aside from even this committee, please know that people have written countless emails making wonderful suggestions that we are bringing also to the table. So I can't imagine that with this kind of community interaction that we're not going to be able to come up with something truly astounding.
Bill.
Yes, Elaine, thank you. I want to just be sure that one other point of interest in NVU and then with Vermont Tech, et cetera. The legislature, because many of our members are hearing from many constituents, as you all know, are concerned and wanting to support the Vermont State Colleges system. So there has been a process by which legislators could add suggestions to Dylan, help me with the name, but a gathering of ideas to support the VSCS system. And I want to make sure that they are getting directly to the college initiatives, such as what you're describing, Elaine, and are not missed as things are looking specifically for NVU or for Vermont Tech or Castleton or community college, et cetera. Do you know if that connection has been made? And Dylan, let's make sure that we as legislative trustees ensure that those suggestions are making their way directly to the campus leadership.
We are trying to funnel all suggestions into our NVU Strong website.
Yes.
So if we can just get that, if those suggestions can be put into that website, then we'll have them all ready for the committee to consider.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was looking for, the actual way to make sure that suggestions that we're hearing as legislators get appropriately directed into campus initiatives.
Right, that would be helpful. NVU
Okay.
Strong website.
So then I have a second question, and that touches on what Sophie mentioned earlier, I believe, which is in addition to campus-focused initiatives, of which are primary and very important, that there really will need to be also a system-wide educational convening. And Elaine, you just happen to be going first, so maybe I'll ask you and Sophie to comment on how you see the connection between NVU Strong type initiatives and similar initiatives on other campuses, and a system-wide collaboration to look at changes at a system level.
Absolutely. I think all of the presidents have agreed that we do need some system level discussion. And to that end, I know that particularly I've been working very closely with Pat and Joyce, because Pat has a nursing program already on the Linden campus. And then Joyce and I have been discussing the possibilities of looking at potentially relocating a center, maybe in St. Johnsbury, to the Linden campus as just one example. So they have both very graciously agreed to help us probably serve as resources for this task force, and to, because they are going to be intricately involved in whatever solution that we come up with in the future. So that is one aspect. And also Karen Scalfaro has stated her interest in working with us related to duplicative programs, and just making sure that we can potentially, in some cases, position low enroll programs on the Johnson or Linden campuses at Castleton if they would be better served there, and vice versa. So she might have some that would make more sense on the NVU campus. So we have all agreed to work with each other in various capacities, depending on what the issue is that we are considering. So I've been very pleasantly kind of excited by that potential, because I think that we are really now all focused on making this work as a system as well.
Great.
Thank you. Other thoughts or questions for Elaine, anticipating that there'll be more, quite a bit more when we meet in a few weeks on June 1st, but anything else for today?
Yeah. At the risk, can I make one further comment?
I'm going to have one too, so you get one.
Okay, Elaine, as I listen, and I know some of the programs that NVU offers and some at each of the other campuses, I don't think we can too often emphasize the importance and deep value to the state of Vermont's economy for the training that is provided on our campuses for the professionals, as you nurses, school guidance counselors, teachers, dental hygienists. I mean, it crosses different campuses, but I continue to believe that the work of the Vermont State Colleges system on our campuses as it pertains to the workforce in Vermont is simply not fully understood or appreciated broadly in the state. And when we're talking about preserving this system, we're talking about preserving training for the workforce of Vermont. And I think we need to find ways to constantly bring that to our public's attention.
Yeah, I just in terms of one quick example for that, when I look at just how many licensed mental health counselors
I was just thinking of them. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can see the outreach all over the entire state of Vermont. I mean, we are the major producers of this particular category. And like you said, it goes across many categories: teachers, business people. I mean, all types of categories that we are responsible for training so many of the employees in Vermont. And when you look at our heat maps to see where our students come from, you will see that most of them are really surrounding, they're very geographically centered around our institutions, because people are trying to access the institution that is close by to their homes and then get out into the workforce.
And then stay in Vermont to continue to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we all wonder how David Silverman would have turned out if he hadn't had the benefit of his time on the hilltop in Johnson. He's probably one of our best examples of how you can really turn somebody around.
Well, yeah, that's probably true, but let's not discount the other 19 NVU graduates that are at just my company.
It's great. Elaine, I have one quick question, and it's for the other presidents as well. Very shortly, or not too long ago, rather, each of you poured heart and soul into an updated strategic plan for each of your organizations. Is there anything in your current thinking that either builds on that plan or takes it in a different direction?
I don't think we're taking it in a different direction. I think that we're just, we are continuing to move that plan forward because those pillars are critical to, I mean, our first pillar was ensuring financial sustainability. So, I mean, this is smack dab right in that, that work. So it doesn't take us off in a different direction. I think it continues to build, and then some of our other initiatives like community engagement, like ensuring that there's quality professional liberal arts training for our students, those continue.
Thank you. Okay. Sophie, shall we transition?
Yes. So I think Pat Moulton and VTC would be a good next up.
Hello, Pat.
Hear me? Is that what you're saying? Duh.
There you are.
Now, can you hear me now? As they like to say. Okay. Sorry about that. My brothers would tell you I'm rarely muted, so that they would have enjoyed seeing that. So thank you for the opportunity to talk with the board members today. I wanted to start by just talk a minute about our financial situation. We are slated to end this fiscal year with a surplus. We anticipate pushing that, and that's even with all our COVID expenses. We anticipate pushing that all into strategic reserves. We credit that with more students in the residence halls, as well as some decent enrollment this year. That puts us operating in black of the last four operating years, with a small deficit in fiscal 18 that we could easily absorb. As with all of us, fiscal year 21 is the wild card, as there's so much that's unpredictable there. Wanted to talk about our securing the future work, and you'll recall last summer and fall, it seems like years ago, but it was just last summer, we were talking about our securing the future. And at that time, I had reported to the board, we wanted to focus on what's core to our mission of education. And to that end, as it relates to our anaerobic biodigester, we had attempted to sell or lease that. We had at one point 8, 9, 10 companies interested. We asked for a request for proposals. We only had 2 respondents to the request for proposals. Of the 2, one provided a plan to wind down operations. The other gave us a plan that was not financially feasible. Therefore, we are proceeding with shutting down and mothballing the digester. And that will be completed by the end of this month, end of May. We'll be mothballing it for another day, and eventually at some point we may make a decision about whether or not to sell off certain assets, but right now it will be mothballed and operations will cease. That will have ramifications for farm operations, manure spreading, et cetera, so we'll have to update all those plans. We have plans to sell the Enterprise Center. We have listed that center on Route 66 with a realtor. We have some local interest from a group that's quite excited about looking at for multi-use facility, and one use could be daycare, which is of huge demand here in the region. I would also report this is the last semester we'll be teaching equine studies and fire science here at Vermont Tech. Those 2 programs are ending. Possibility of rebuilding fire science at some later date. I'm pleased to say we've found homes for all of our horses. None will be euthanized. We are selling the tack and other equipment, and we're working on selling our fire truck and other equipment related to that work. So we are still very much focused on trying to get rid of other assets that are not directly core to our education mission. Next category I would call COVID-related planning, long-term planning, strategic planning. We have a very engaged and energetic community at this point, both on and off the campuses. Ideas are flowing in from everywhere for fall and long term. We too, like Elaine, are looking at revenue generating ideas, as well as how we could right size, look at facilities reuse and consolidation I think this COVID experience has helped us understand that working at home is viable, and we probably don't need all the square footages that we have on all our campuses and a dedicated office to every person. We could be looking at shared and hotel space, and we're taking a good hard look at that. We have created a transition task force email address for folks to send us information. And as soon as I get done with this meeting, I'm broadcasting out a message about our very first meeting of a task force, which we had last Friday. We have set up a transitional advisory task force, we're calling it, which is 15 members plus myself. I'm trying to be more resource myself, as Elena suggested, but I also am sitting in on all these meetings. It's 15 members comprised of faculty, staff, students, and members of the administration. All our collective bargaining units are represented in that task force. And the goal of the task force is to assist in the development of a plan to transition Vermont Technical College to a more sustainable institution able to withstand vulnerabilities exposed by COVID-19 virus, as well as the challenges of the system. So that group is working, had our first meeting last Friday. Alan Rogers has graciously offered to be a facilitator. He does that very expertly and has proven that thus far. We're starting with goals of what I'm calling sort of goals and guardrails. What should the college look like post-transformation? And we're focusing in 5 areas. Number 1, students. What's good for students, affordability, access, etc. Number 2 is access and assuring that we can expand our reach across the state and elsewhere. 3rd is community, looking at our geographic community as well as the college community. 4th is finances and assuring our plan comes up with a positive plan for positive operations, including maintaining strategic and other reserves. And the 5th, but not last but not certainly least, is programming, taking a good hard look at our programs and how we deliver. I will say some of our other future planning, I mean, faculty have really been quite energized and we're now really having conversations about how we might consolidate certain programs, hyper majors, if you will, with minors that have good, strong minors. We're also looking at decentralized and low residency delivery options. Those are already being considered for the fall, really trying to figure out how we open access to non-traditional students. I've set a deadline of July 1 to try to come up with a plan. That's fast, but we know we need to move quickly to give certainty to our students and our communities. In addition, the town of Randolph has really gotten quite energized as well. Many business and community leaders have come forward offering assistance, forming groups themselves. We have a group that's really focused on repurposing buildings that can meet community and regional needs, daycare, affordable housing, etc. And we have groups that are assessing certain buildings on campus as we speak. We also are looking at a special task force for our agriculture program, including the farm. We have lots of interest. A lot of people have reached out, including Ellen Kaler from the Sustainable Jobs Fund, who's offered to assist us with a farm to plate type planning process, trying to do something a little shorter, but her success with farm to plate and activating the ag community, I think will be helpful. And we're working with our team here to come up with a process that sounds like it would work for us to reimagine what our agriculture program can look like. Regarding our planning for fall of 2020, we are planning on returning with face-to-face classrooms. We've communicated that out to our students. Obviously, we're monitoring the Department of Health and Centers for Disease Control to see what we're going to be free to do. We have a protocols committee looking at various scenarios for reopening. We're following guidance that's out there, and there seems to be new content every day. AVIC has been great about sharing, the Association of Vermont Independent Colleges has been great about sharing information from the private colleges and what they're working on. We're clearly working on backup plans if we cannot return to face-to-face that include low residency, remote delivery, but also looking at staggered access to labs because that's been the biggest challenge for students is getting access and then being able to work together in labs. We're planning on holding our 2020 commencement, which was supposed to happen this weekend in September during homecoming, if we can still make that happen in September. That was the students' choice. We surveyed our graduating seniors to see what they would prefer. So in summary, we're doing well financially. We're progressing on our already planned securing of the future work, and we're moving forward with an accelerated process of planning. To your question, Mr. Chair, regarding strategic plan, we had pretty much gotten close to finishing our 6th year and wrapping that up when all things COVID attacked. I would say a lot of that strategic plan has been accelerated, really. It's going to have to move faster, but I also think this COVID has motivated folks to think a little more out of the box, so that I think some of what we might have considered longer term for strategic plan, we might be able to accomplish much faster. So I, like Elaine, I don't think we're moving in a different direction as much as we've accelerated, and we're really building on what we had planned to move it forward faster. That is the extent of my formal remarks, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thoughts and questions for Pat? James.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. I guess it was about a year ago or so, you came out with a number of different ideas I thought had a lot of merit, having to do with reusing or repurposing parts of the campus. And the question, I guess, is as much directed at Church and Sophie as you, but at what point would it be a good idea to begin discussing those things? Or maybe you have already.
Well, I would say that we're moving forward. That's some of what the community group is, the Town of Randolph group is really looking at what buildings would lend themselves well for what kind of reuse. And I've asked them to kind of focus on the north end of campus, if you will, a couple of dorms, and maybe even up to 1 or 2 either administration or classroom buildings, if we can in fact consolidate our footprint, recognizing we probably don't need all these offices, probably don't need to heat all these buildings, but we are moving forward with that. And we have been, I've talked briefly with a local affordable housing group, and we're working very closely with our Regional Development Corporation on those plans, but haven't really put a lot of pen to paper about that yet.
Thank you.
Dylan.
Thank you, President Moulton. Just wanted to jump off of a little bit of what Bill Lippert said previously, but you know, we're all aware of the value of these institutions to equipping our workforce. And over the past month, I received so many suggestions in my email account from members of the business community saying, my goodness, Vermont Tech is absolutely essential to us meeting our workforce needs in the coming years. I'm just wondering, you had indicated that you had these task forces going, you had a few buckets, and I'm very pleased to hear agriculture's in there. It's a really exciting opportunity that fits Vermont well, of course, but how does business fit in? You mentioned community and other task forces. Where's business in that mix? Because I know that they are fired up and ready to help.
Well, thank you for that, Dylan. I've been talking with a lot of our employer partners. We've been getting ideas from our employer partners. Several have reached out to say, count me in. There are some of the local employers who are keenly interested in some of our affordable housing. There isn't an employer that we work with that isn't keenly interested in making sure we're still here, including to the point of potentially offering instructional and classroom space in their facility. I have not pursued a lot of that, but and as you know, we have advisory committees with each program, or hopefully you know. So we will be reaching out to a lot of our core employer partners as we roll this process forward and say, here's what we're thinking. How does this sound to you? I intend to do some specific outreach to some employers that we currently do on location, instructional and education, to see if they might want to be a partner to open that up to other students. Again, with the idea of decentralizing out to our employer partners as well as possibly career and tech ed. I don't have a specific committee for that, but you're making me rethink that. So thank you for that question.
Very good. Adam.
Yes, sort of in the same vein here. I wonder, to what extent are you exploring some of the perhaps partnerships with CTEs? You know, I think a lot of the support around the Randolph campus was just that, on how to strengthen the campus. How are you balancing also exploring a new delivery model with the pressures to retain the campus? And are you mixing that in? And I guess for just to continue, I have the floor here. It seems to me, Church, that, you know, so much of this, what we're talking about today really is system-wide, but what we're hearing today is campus focus. So as we do move to more of a system-wide discussion, understanding how that's all gonna braid together is front and center for me. Thank you. So Pat, is that in your thinking on how to make that CTE connection?
Absolutely. It's in my thinking. I'm trying to let our task force sort of evolve some of their own ideas, but some of my thinking is to partner with CTE around certain programs and potentially have them be our lab locations regionally. I look at programs like advanced manufacturing, auto, diesel, et cetera, where we're working to build those direct pathways. What if we were actually offering instruction in those, at those locations? We might have to look at some flexible scheduling, but yes, that is absolutely in my mix. And my thoughts and my ideas, and much of the leadership team here. So yes, we are mixing that in and really looking at that decentralized method of delivery.
Do you find a struggle then with balancing the sort of rallying around the campus notion and strengthening the campus in that delivery?
You know, I'm not finding much resistance to that. I think there's a recognition that our footprint here needs to get right-sized, and that we can, and that yes, opening up access to students is going to make it more affordable if we're at a low residency, or even better yet, if students are home, they're taking classes either in their living room or at the CTE. We're taking a slightly different approach than the associate's degree at CTE study that the legislature had funded, where we were actually looking at trying to see if we could hire CTE faculty, et cetera. We're running into accreditation and other issues with that, but if we could offer remote distance learning from here with maybe like a lab tech at the CTE, then we're not duplicating faculty, we're not worried about ensuring the quality of the remote delivery, because we're doing the remote delivery. It's the hands-on lab piece that would be either a lab tech there, or, you know, potentially we're rotating faculty around. We haven't gotten into the specifics, but not finding much pushback with that idea. The idea of sort of handing over our associate's degree, that's where we get an issue. And I'm simplifying that description too much, but as we start to put some more meat on those bones, we'll be able to talk more specifically about those things, Adam.
Thank you.
Very good. Janet.
Yeah, so Pat, is VTC and CCV continuing to come up with ways to consolidate what I call the back office?
Thank you for that, Janet. Just as soon as I saw your little box light up, I said, darn it, I forgot to put that CCV, VTC and thing in there. And actually, as we were talking, Joyce and Lit and Andy and I are meeting tomorrow morning at 9 to continue that discussion. So yes, that is very much on the radar.
Okay.
Church, if I might ask a question, sorry, to follow up on what Janet just asked, and I'm not sure who the right response would be, but that sense of consolidated back office, is there any reason that's not a conversation across all 4 schools, and that it's just taking place with it? If I heard you correctly, it's just Vermont Tech and CCV at the moment who are in this discussion.
Correct. I can't speak to the rest of the system, but it's us to start that with that, and in part because we've had a long-term relationship with CCV around Hartness Library, so it's sort of a natural extension to take that the next step. But that may be something to bring up on a more of a system-wide. Yep.
Megan, if I could weigh in, I think that I would love us to think about that, but I don't think it all has to be centralized in the chancellor's office. I think what needs to happen is think about, okay, so how does an operation at the college, how does it take on the operation for that particular area for the system? So I think that there's ways to locate a lot of some of this work out at campuses and could be included in and expanded just with at an individual college. So I think that there's potential. I think the way that we've done some consolidations hasn't, it's come with a lot of baggage. And so I think we have to think about how we approach consolidation, perhaps in some different ways.
Good. Anything else for Vermont Tech? Then Sophie, where do we go? Oh, here's Bill.
Can't hear you, Bill.
Muted, Bill.
So you talked about a July 1st deadline. I'm just a little concerned that we have a board meeting in middle of June or toward the latter part of June, and whether as fast as July 1 appears to push the work, whether it's really going to be fast enough for us as a board to be able to look across the system and see where we are.
That's an excellent point. It roughly gives us, well, at this point, a little less than 2 months.
I know it's all happening very fast, but when we meet as a board on July 17th and 18th, I think there will be some expectation that we will have some sense from campuses and across the system as to what we're looking at.
That's our hope, is we're ready by then. And hopefully I'll have some updates for you at the June meeting as well.
Excellent. Chancellor, where do we go from here?
Castleton.
Okay.
Karen. Yes.
Okay.
Karen.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for some opportunities here to say a few words. You will be witnessing a handoff. This will be my last board meeting, and at your committee meetings on June 1st, you'll have my interim successor, Jonathan Spiro. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to say a few remarks, and then I think he's going to share just some thoughts about reopening in the fall for Castleton. So I wanted to start by answering our Chair Hines' question about what's changed about the way we're looking at our sustainability and our planning. And, you know, I would say from our perspective, when we were responding to the white paper and working on the future of Castleton, we were focused on the future of Castleton. You know, each of the presidents were working on their own institutions within their communities, internal and external, to make sure that we're strategizing well and looking at how to move into the future. What's changed is this idea of more of a systems focus. You know, we, over the last, couple of months, and certainly with the impact of COVID-19, more than ever, we have to find ways to partner and, gain efficiencies, share resources, and look at what will we look like, to serve Vermont for decades to come. So the way that we've started to look at this at Castleton is, we look at our strategy for sustainability, which, over the last 3 academic years, in terms of dealing with an operational deficit and thinking about how to bring Castleton forward, we had a combination of some expense control and some bold actions, but also looking at revenue generation. You've heard this from all of the presidents so far. It has to be part of the formula that we're thinking about. How will we make sure that we're continuing to sustain healthy revenues for the institution? So I'm going to first say a few words about costs. Similar to what you've probably heard from everyone else, we're all doing this. This spring at Castleton, we did freeze our spending and put a hold on all of our capital projects so that we would make sure that, we were well positioned as we're coming through the challenges of COVID-19 and the refunds. We sustain the highest refunds because we have the most residential students. So that impact on us was pretty substantial. So we have to look at this from a viewpoint of not only where we're coming from this spring, but how do we move into summer and into the fall in a healthy way. So some of the other things that we're looking to do in terms of restructure and expenses is we're looking at our soundings program, which is a university-wide program that introduces our students to the fine and liberal arts. And we've come up with some ideas that to restructure that program in such a way that will help us save some expenses there while still delivering a sound model to our students, because we still believe in that. In addition, we're starting to look at some of the growth areas building on the work that we've done over the past 3 years, which includes opening additional locations in Killington and Bennington. I'm pleased to say that while particularly in Bennington, we were predicting that we would take a loss on those programs in the first year, because you're establishing a new location with fewer students and establishing some initial costs. But we ended up being in the black both with Killington and Bennington in its first year, but also positioned ourselves in such a way that we're making a name for ourselves in those regions, and we're seeing a lot of interest. So there's opportunity for expansion there, and we're really focused on that, hyper-focused on that. Our chairs across campus are looking at ways to convert many of our 4-year programs to 3-year programs using a similar model to what we're doing in Killington. You're going to see more of this cooperative education model coming out of Castleton. This is an opportunity for students to complete their bachelor's degree in 3 years, to secure paid internships that also allow them to earn credits while they're learning on the job, so that when they graduate, they now have both a credential and a resume. And, you know, we really believe this is the future, and we want to see, our academic leaders have really come together around this concept. They see the value, and they're working really hard to gain a competitive edge with this that will help to draw people to Vermont. That's the other piece of this. It draws people to the state because it helps students to plant roots in the workplace while they're in school, and then hopefully we want them to stay, which would be great. We're looking at expanding on the cooperative models at Killington. We have 4 collaborative partners that we've identified, and we're in the works of just bringing that to yet another location. Looking to probably start a class of about 15, but it won't be till fall of 21. And then leveraging our Title III grant, that's pretty substantial, the $2.25 million. We are already seeing gains in terms of student support with this Pathways to Graduation. We've got all of our staff in place. We've already started technology upgrades, which has been really critically important right now with our conversion, our evolution to remote delivery, and how we've been able to be successful with that. It's an ongoing process. As you know, I think for all of the institutions, probably us in Vermont Technical College was the heaviest lift, because we have so many hands-on programs, and we weren't as well positioned with online as our partner NVU was. So it's been quite a heavy lift, but I'm really proud of the work that the team's done. And then I think in terms of the systems mentality, this idea of collaborations within the system, you heard President Collins talk about discussions about how we might share resources and reduce some duplicative programs, and identifying where the students will best be served, so that we're not spending additional money if we're able to serve the state of Vermont in new ways. And then, so for us, you know, we now are up to about 20 pathways with CCV. We're a very strong partner for their graduates. We do offer the same tuition, which you'll probably remember, we're still doing that. And we're working really hard to expand those pathways. We have very clear access points for our prospective students, so it's really easy for them to see what's required, what they need to do at CCV, and how they would transfer to us upon graduation to be able to seamlessly get their bachelor's degree at Castleton. But we've also started discussions about shared space with CCV, VTC. You know that we have the nursing programs. CCV currently offers the gen ed for our nurses in Bennington, so that's huge. And then I mentioned the duplicative programs, and then also eliminating some of the low enrolled programs and reducing some of those. And the way that we're deciding, starting to take a look at really which programs are the right programs for our area, that's involving a campus-wide collaboration, as well as our external partners, the Rutland Advisory Group, our strong partners in terms of the sites, Mike Salamano at Killington, Tom D at Pennington, Claudio Fort in Rutland, and some of these others. So, you know, those discussions are going to be really important to make sure that all of our curriculum remains relevant, and it's what folks need moving forward, so that Castleton continues to provide a really important service to Vermont and to our region. And I guess the last piece is in terms of, you know, as our fellow institutions are looking at what this future model will look like, you know, we are better positioned now to be able to offer remote delivery across the state. So, you know, say that President Collins and her team identify programs that they feel it would be helpful if Castleton were to adopt and handle. We are in a better position now to do more decentralized educational processes statewide. So any way we can step up to help there, to serve throughout the state, we're ready. You know, we're happy to do that. And that's with that. And I don't know, Chair Hines, if you want to open for questions first, what Jonathan Spiro was going to just say a few words about some of the discussions we've been having about our phased reopen, the way we're approaching fall, which I think might be helpful for all of you to hear.
Why don't you go ahead, Jonathan?
Thank you, Chairman Hines. Thank you, President Scalfaro. Regarding the fall, Castleton very much hopes that we will open in a face-to-face mode because we do face-to-face learning really, really well. However, we have many, many options, and as someone alluded to earlier, those options are increasing by the day as we consult with experts nationwide about how we can open up in the fall. So in the great tradition of administrators everywhere, we have convened a task force to explore our options in the fall. And I'll just say that I'm very pleased that our task force is coordinating with our sister institutions, not just in the VSCS, but all of our sister institutions, including the privates here in Vermont, because cooperation is in the best interest of our students, so that we all institute basically the same practices at the same time in the fall, but also because, frankly, we don't want anyone to try to get a competitive advantage by making overly optimistic promises about being fully open in the fall. So more to come within the next few days regarding more concrete ideas for the fall. But as we say, along with President Moulton said earlier, we certainly hope to open up face-to-face in the fall.
Thank you, Jonathan.
If I, Mr. Chair, if I could just add one thing, just a cautiously optimistic information for y'all is that as of right now, pending being able to reopen in the fall, our deposits and our registrations are comparable to last year. So and these are registrations and housing deposits that have happened during this remote delivery period. So, so again, we're cautiously optimistic, but we are certainly taking measures in the event that, let's just say we're cautiously optimistic.
Very good, thank you. Okay, thoughts and questions for Castleton? Adam.
I think this is probably for more than just Castleton, but I'm wondering in the cautiously optimistic mode of planning, in the alternative, if there are Vermont students who are planning on going outside of Vermont for their education, what kind of opportunities our system can have in planning for alternative classes for those folks as August 1st or August 15th comes and those folks are not leaving the state for their education.
Do you want, Jonathan, do you want to take it or do you want me to go, or it's up to you?
Why don't you start, President Scalfaro?
Okay. So if I understand what you're asking, Adam, you're thinking about folks who were not planning to stay in Vermont, were planning to pursue their education outside of the state, but as the summer comes, we are inviting folks to apply late. We are trying to increase the level of flexibility so that we can serve students and trying to get that messaging out so that they feel comfortable looking at the Vermont State Colleges, in this case, Castleton, for their educational needs. And, you know, we've traditionally done, especially in the last couple of years, because we, you know, as you know, we had the teach outs, we had the 3 closing institutions in our area last year. We've gotten pretty nimble at providing that personal attention in transcript evaluations and quick turnaround and helping students see that clear pathway and understand exactly what they can expect and what the timeline will look like from the moment they step foot on campus to graduation. So I think those are the most important things, that they have a comfort level and a team in place that will provide them with the, hold their hands, so to provide them with the support all the way through. And we do, we will embrace them, you know, even if it's a little bit later. than normal.
Okay.
So Pat, you're muted.
If I could add, Mr. Chair, as to your question directly, Adam, as we start to confirm what programs we can offer remotely and or in a non-traditional schedule, we're going to be blasting that out, similar to what President Scalfaro said. We know there are folks who are going to want to stay home either for this semester or perhaps the whole year, and we want to give them an opportunity to do that here in Vermont.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add that I'm normally a very pessimistic person. So it is, excuse me. So I believe that some of the students who have already committed to Castleton for the fall are in fact not going to attend in the fall for lots of reasons, including the fact that their families will be experiencing financial hardships in the weeks and months to come. That's the pessimistic part. However, I'm very optimistic that many Vermont students who currently go to college out of state are going to be coming home in the next months and will want to stay in Vermont in the next year and will want to attend college in the VSCS, whether it's face-to-face or remote. So I think we're going to see, well, one of Stephen's M curves. We're going to see a slight dip in current enrollment and then a rise, maybe up to the day before the semester starts or even into the first week of the semester. So that's the optimistic part of me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Janet. After listening to, you know, the NVU and the Castleton and what Pat said, maybe this is more of an idea, but I think there's a way to share resources on an academic program that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, why don't you take this program and we'll take that program. I think if you could use the concept Pat was talking about, where maybe you have a core, I'll use the word professor or lecturer on, I don't care, biology, but at each, and that person is located at Campus A, but the lab is supported at both locations. So I think you could share professors and have the project work and the lab work be done at the unique locations, but get some leverage out of synergy. And then that would leave each college still with this like wide range of things you could go for versus showing up somewhere and realizing that your choices just got really limited because you were moving a program, you know, just to one place. And that, well, that will make sense for some things. I think there might be another creative way to keep your breadth of offerings, yet do it with a different model that actually saves on your resources. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Jonathan.
So I'm compelled to respond because, Janet, because I, for years, have preached that idea. You gave the example of biology. I've always given the example of Chinese and Arabic. There's just not enough students at Castleton to support a full-fledged language program in Chinese and Arabic and maybe even other things. But are there enough students in Linden and Castleton and around the state to support that program? You betcha. So I love your suggestion. Thank you.
And a number of us who were in NVU Johnson for one of the Secure the Future open forums, we had a very eloquent student talking about how he felt that in order to be a good graduate with a business major, he needed to also be able to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And he was chagrined that he couldn't take Spanish as a minor. So even if it's not Chinese, perhaps even even a larger cohort might feel the way that he does, saying that in the way his country is evolving, college graduates ought to be able to converse in Spanish as well. Other thoughts or questions? Yes, Lynn.
Yes, thank you. I also heard something at those Secure the Future open forums. I heard people at NVU, this may be something Elaine wants to, I think I mentioned this to Elaine last September. at our retreat, but I heard students who were unhappy about the fact that they went to one of those two schools and their major, XYZ major, they only had a couple of courses and the other courses were over at the other campus. And it occurred to me that this was one college with two different campuses, but there's no reason why someone should stay at one campus all 4 years. You might start at, in this case, NBU, but it could be used other campuses as well. You could start with the studies that you start with in one campus, go back and transfer in and live in the dorm on the other campus for the next year or so, take some more courses in that major or those courses you want, and then go back to the original campus. You know, I think that we have to open up the paradigm a little bit here, and whether it's taking biology with a different lab in another school or whether it's the situation with NBU, there should be flexibility to be able to move around. You're not necessarily, once you've committed to one campus doesn't mean you are stuck at that campus. You can have flexibility and move around.
A lot of nodding heads. Thank you, Lynn. Anything else for Castleton? And again, this is all the prelude to what we'll be hearing a lot more about in June. Okay, Sophie, I think it's obvious that we now turn to President Judy.
Yes, it is.
Welcome, Joyce.
Hey, thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to sort of share where CCV is. And I will say that you've heard it from all three of the presentations. CCV is very much a part of the planning. But we're at this point, we will be taking our lead from each of the colleges as they put together some plans. So I think that while I am having close conversations with the presidents, I also think we're also trying to let some conversation and ideas gel from the colleges as well. So know that we are having conversations at lots of different levels. I did want to also bring the board up to date on some of the things that are happening at CCV, because I want to assure you that we are never a college that is sitting still. And so just to let you know where we are, for example, with summer, you know, we moved all of our classes from on ground to online for summer, where we will launch 365 classes in a little over a week. And right now we have more than 2,500 students enrolled, and our actual, we're quite, I hesitate to say this because we still have another 10 days of enrollment, but we are matching last summer's enrollment right now. So that's, we're happy about that. But again, I'm always cautious because if the last student walked through our door and no one else registered, we wouldn't be in good shape, but that we aren't having those indications. A couple other things that I think give you an indication of sort of our work in terms of constantly being responsive to what's going on in the environment. Last week, and you may have seen the press release, CCV was one of 67 colleges and universities across the country that was designated as a second chance Pell institution. And what that means is that we will be able to work with incarcerated students and they will now be eligible for Pell. Inmates who are incarcerated are not eligible to apply for Title IV funds, but the federal government is trying a pilot, and we were one of those schools that was selected. So it's that we have been offering, I think you know, we've had a close relationship with the Department of Corrections and have been offering some courses with philanthropic support in the Northern Correctional Facility in Newport, and it's been highly successful to the point where the superintendent said this has changed the culture of this prison. And I want to be really clear, my goal is not to help inmates get a degree. My goal is to help them so that when they are ready to be released, they have some skills, they have some hope, and they perhaps will be able to reduce the recidivism rate in Vermont, which is now hovering right around 50%. So So now we will not have to use philanthropic dollars. Inmate can apply to for financial aid. They will only be able to take CCV courses that are offered in the prison. So there's some restrictions around that, but it's pretty exciting for Vermont to be one of the 67 places, 67 CCV to be one of the 67 schools, and for Vermont to be able to, we will have a chance to offer it in any of the prisons that that are open to that. And I will say that Commissioner of Corrections is a very has been a long fan of CCV, so that has been huge for us. The second thing I will just say, in terms of new developments, last week actually was quite a nice time for CCV. We received a significant grant from the Northville Savings Bank. They select one entity every 3 years to substantially support them, and they are substantially supporting us to further develop our Flex grant, which means that, our Flex grant program, where we are offering courses that have 5 different entry points during the course of a semester. So it's really designed for the adult who wants to progress at a self-pace pretty quickly. We are modeling this after the Kentucky system, which has had really wonderful success with it. So those are just a couple of examples of what we're doing to get people started, which is important because we are the entry point, and then being able to help our students move on to NVU, to Castleton and Vermont Tech is a critical piece for us. And so I think that a couple of other presidents mentioned the work we're doing around the pathways and seamless course maps are critical to students. They want to know, what do I have to take at CCV and what can I take at NVU or Castleton or Vermont Tech, exactly what I need to take to finish my degree. And so that's been a lot of work, and it's a lot of ongoing work that we need to keep moving forward. In response to a couple of questions that have come up, Adam, you had asked about CTE collaborations, and Vermont Tech and CCV do a lot with CTEs. We actually have 500 students that are enrolled in CTE courses, that are students at CTEs now that are enrolled in CCV courses. And so I think there's a chance for both CCV and Vermont Tech to work closely together to deepen those relationships, but there's a foundation for us to build on. Right now it's more course by course as opposed to program, but I think over time we can further that development. And I also wanted to respond to Janet about some of the operations. I do think there's some work that we can do as a system around some of how do we think about it as a system, as opposed to each of us doing some of the work ourselves. And I'll use the Hartness Library. The Hartness Library is a collaboration that's been in existence between CCV and Vermont Tech for years. It is a national model. And I really think we should take a look at that, and it could be a national model for the system. And I know this can be highly controversial, but I can also tell you that CCV and Vermont Tech students are incredibly well served by the Hartness Library. And it's a combination of on ground and online, but we have embedded librarians that serve our online courses. Students get very good service. And I think if you ask any faculty member at CCV or Vermont Tech, they would tell you the same. So I think there's some places that I hope that we can find some, yes, efficiencies, but at the same time, better service. So I'll stop there, but I think there's a tremendous amount we can do. And I think CCV can be a partner in the work and the planning that is happening at the other schools.
Thank you, Joyce. Thoughts and questions for President Judy? Janet.
2 things. Well, first of all, Joyce, I think CCV gets some of these grants and things that you get are the result of the results that you deliver and the innovation you've shown, right? They don't just come out of the sky. So congratulations to you and your team for that. But to build on your comment about the synergy, and I think I brought this up in a previous trustees meeting, Yeah, there's not just one model for consolidation of what I'll call the back office, right? It doesn't mean you put it in the chancellor's office. You know, it can be that one college is best at something and they become the, you know, the main HR function, but you have satellite people at your other campuses. You get the benefits of contracts like marketing in particular. It doesn't mean every school can't call their own shots and direction, but somebody's managing the contract such that everybody gets the best terms. And you can divide those things across the system, sometimes just based on where the current best practice or strongest person is, and then the rest share in that. So there's a lot of ways to consolidate. And in the various consolidations I've gone through in my career, you always get 20%. You always, that's the low ball. So if you were to add up, you know, all of some back office function today and what it costs, there's 20% opportunity there at a minimum when you get those right synergies. But I think people get afraid of losing control, a previous bad experience with how it was done. But there are very successful ways to do it. I don't think it's a risk that CCB and VTC work on some of these things together, because starting is better than talking about it and never starting. But to the previous point, I think Megan made, you know, there is definitely opportunity, you know, maybe once two are doing it to pull in the others or in the other direction. So I just think that's where there's some of the biggest financial opportunity will come from that.
Great, thanks.
Excellent. Adam.
Yeah, Joyce, thank you. You know, I think so much of what we have in front of us is opportunity. And while I certainly appreciate that everyone's job here to solve the funding issue is complex enough, I think we really have an opportunity here to also broaden that conversation to include the CTE funding and how it fits into this broader system. So while I don't want to make that anyone in this call's primary responsibility, that's a complex issue, it certainly seems like the absolutely perfect time to bring that all together. So I hope we can do that. I'm happy to participate in that and encourage us all to think about that.
Great, thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Other thoughts and questions? Okay. Well, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, it's a good opportunity to also reflect on what we've heard from each of our presidents, as well as from Yasmin and Steve, and to let them know about any questions or follow-up issues that you'd like to have them address, either on June 1st or between now and then. I mean, I had a question for Castleton around the 3-year bachelor's degree and how that interleaved with student financial aid. And I think we all may have thoughts and questions to follow up on. And I would just encourage you to reach out to the appropriate president or to Steve and Yasmin with anything that you would like to have addressed between now and then, as I'm sure we'll have a long and rich day on the 1st of June. Sophie, any transitional remarks before we move on in the agenda?
The only other thing was going back to what Linda had mentioned in terms of planning for the fall, and Jonathan had touched on this as well, but the deans of students at each of the residential colleges are working with the planning process for the education sector to open up and what that will look like. And needless to say, it's an incredibly complex and challenging thing to do, from, you know, planning for evacuation if there's a flare-up, contact tracing, testing, social distancing, all that stuff is very complex. But there is, and I think Jonathan had touched on this too, there is great collaboration going on between all the colleges in the state of Vermont to have input into that planning process, so that when the governor issues guidance or however that works out, we'll all be working from the same script. So I did want to just make sure that everybody knew that that work is going on, and our deans of students are working very hard on that.
Very good.
Otherwise, I think we've wrapped up this portion. If you wanted to move on to the next the
Thank you,
next section.
One of the last pieces of business we did at a previous meeting was to commission a search for what we're calling the longer-term interim chancellor. And just for, I know we have a number of people who are watching our meeting today. I just want to go back through and explain a little bit about what that means. We anticipate recruiting a new interim chancellor to begin as soon as we can, who will work with the presidents and the board as we go through a so-called transition year, a planning year that we are working to define and clarify the terms and conditions of that year with the Vermont General Assembly. And so we might refer to Chancellor Zadatny as our short-term interim chancellor while we recruit a long-term interim chancellor, with the idea being that the person we're recruiting will guide us through a process that will go from approximately, let's say, June or July of this year, right up to the beginning of the semester and maybe a little later in fall of 2021. So essentially a year-long role. As we start talking about that search, we are becoming very aware that we're dealing with kind of three corners of a triangle. And the three corners of the triangle are, first, it probably goes without saying that the selection of a new chancellor is a decision that's reserved to the board. It's very clear that the board makes that choice. But the second corner of the triangle is the board would be foolish to engage in a search without an opportunity to hear from our constituencies, because it obviously, we are an open system. We are active around the state. You've heard this afternoon any number of agendas in play. So while it's the board's decision to make, we also have to find a way that we can engage others more broadly, which brings us to the third corner of the triangle, and that's expediency. If in fact we want to have a single voice leading us through this process, beginning maybe the 1st of July or something, that's not very far away. And we need to find some way to reconcile the need for an expeditious process with the need for an inclusive process. And that's something that the board is going to be talking about in the coming days, about how we can best reconcile those three corners of expedience, inclusion, and have the board end up in a position where it feels that a very deliberate and a careful search process has yielded the best available candidate. On that question of candidates, I am getting one or two, I wouldn't necessarily call them officially nominations, but people emailing me. Some have called me and said, have you considered so-and-so? One that's occurred quite recently was from someone who said, you know, the governor's press conference is better than The Price is Right. We tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we get to watch this, and we see all these great people. And so some of the names have come in, have I think been everybody who was a regular at the Monday, Wednesday, Friday press conference, with the exception of the governor and Health Commissioner Mark Levine. So, you know, people have said, well, why not Michael? Why not Michael? Why not the Labor Commissioner? Why not the Secretary of Commerce? And all names are going on a list, but it is interesting that some of them are coming through, you know, very thoughtful. Well, what about so-and-so? You know, they've just recently retired. I think they can probably have one more game left in them. And why don't you talk to so-and-so to the Price is Right replacement cast? But seriously, it's very good. We've had, you know, upwards of, I think, 40 something suggestions come in over the past few weeks. So it's time for the board to get organized, to think about how we're best going to proceed, because this time frame that we're going to be calling this transition year, the redesign year, the bridge year, whatever it is obviously going to come up very quickly. And we're going to want to have consistent leadership for as long as possible during that period. So for those who are listening, that's kind of the state of the situation right now that we are beginning. And I'd be happy to have any of our trustees weigh in on their thinking as far as this goes as well, because this will be something that we'll be moving into now as a group of trustees pretty promptly. Karen.
The list of names, we've got a lot of talent in Vermont, and I'm sure there's a list is great of others that haven't been mentioned. I got this email from you. I opened it, Church, about 5 minutes before I logged on to this meeting. So I would like an opportunity just to absorb this very important email and think about it. I'm hoping that we're not going to set a direction right now, just because I think that others might have logged on like I did without having had the opportunity to really think about this and the best way to proceed. I think it's very important who the interim is and how we decide to formulate this. The presidents are doing a lot of very good work right now. Respective communities are doing very good work. And it's important that we select a person. These are all smart people, but we need to select a person, a special person who has the ability to synthesize all of this and move it in the right direction in a timely manner.
Karen, I can't agree with you more. I'm really just providing the summary for the benefit of the people who are listening and watching as we get started, just to kind of lay out some of the tensions, if you will, as I described them as we start out, that this won't be just another search done in just the usual way. And again, we're just getting started. I wanted to primarily use this time to announce to the world that these discussions have begun, and the board will proceed, as in a smart and deliberate a way as we can. But I'd welcome any other thoughts from trustees before we go any further. Bill, and then Janet.
I think one of the things that perhaps is worth saying is that I believe there will be some consideration of whether to fill a chancellor's position on an ongoing basis is in fact a choice that we will make. That the hiring of an longer-term interim chancellor does not presume an outcome to that evaluation, and at least it doesn't say we won't. But it's my understanding that we as a group of trustees will be part of making that evaluation as well. And I think it's important that be publicly understood as a part of the process of selecting an interim chancellor.
Thank you, Bill. I should have mentioned that as well. That part of this transition year that we're going into, we'll look at questions about what should the management configuration, if you will, of the state colleges look like going forward, and will it involve a office of the chancellor, which we've had for 60 years or so, or will it evolve to go in another direction? And so, yes, part of the system-wide discussions. Remember that this is going to be college by college as well as system-wide planning over this next year. Part of the system-wide discussion will be that very question. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, David.
Church, have you given any thought to the fact that we're not getting together until June 1st as far as committees, but it sounds like we want to have this process moving forward before then, and how we would actually be able to come together to accomplish that.
We may need to have a brief meeting to, if we decide we're going to commission, for example, a committee to work on this, or whether we want to look at this as a committee of the entire board. If we do want to commission a smaller group, whether it's one of our existing standing committees or a new committee, I think we could do that very efficiently as soon as we're ready to make that decision. And we will probably do it, either a quick Zoom call or even a phone call. We could commission that if that's the collective wisdom of the board. Dylan.
Yeah, thank you. This one, I'm trying to balance the question of expediency and how we move forward. Clearly, this would not be an ideal time typically for this sort of a search, in that our campus communities would not be present. But I do want to point out that the medium we're on is a very strong medium for reaching people where they are. And so as we move forward, I actually think that this is one of those rare instances where, while I prefer face-to-face, given the moment we're in, using this technology to our advantage for some of the things you've outlined with reaching different groups as we move through this expeditiously could come in handy. So I think the key part will just be communicating out our intent as a board for a timeline. And I just want to stress publicly, I think it's really important, I imagine a number of people are watching, that in this instance, we do need to move extremely quickly. We're talking about a short period of time in which we're trying to operate with different stakeholder groups, including lawmakers and the governor, to secure a commitment so that we can move forward with the plan that's been outlined publicly so far, that we will be open in the fall and we intend to provide services for our students. So with that, we need to move very quickly, in my estimation. And I want to just state my opinion that if we move very quickly, we will use this medium going forward as a means to hear from and engage with communities. But speed in this instance is definitely something that would advantage us. I don't want to lose anything in the process, and I think this medium will help us. So as long as the board feels comfortable with that, I just think moving forward, we need to leverage the technology, communicate throughout the summer and throughout this process after we choose someone as well. So just putting that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Adam?
What Dylan said, really everything he said, I think I completely agree with. Speed is of the essence here. We need to have a transparent and open process that allows our different communities to provide input, but I think we need a leader that will help us guide us through this quickly.
Any, Peg? There you go.
Church, it might be helpful, as Dylan mentioned, it's one of the, especially to my generation, it comes as a shock that this Zoom stuff actually might be a good thing. But it might be particularly helpful in something like this if we can sort of define some of the skills that we're looking for, so that folks that are listening and watching us have some idea. They may know someone that they think is absolutely ideal for the situation, but they need to know what the chancellor does. What skills do you expect a chancellor to have to bring into the office especially to bring them in the situation we're in now with the COVID, with all of this stuff. I think it might be helpful to be able to state publicly what skills we're looking for.
Thank you. David?
I think that we probably should acknowledge that the skill set for the awkwardly named long-term interim is probably quite different than if you were hiring somebody for several years, which we're not contemplating because we're not sure that that's going to be the direction we're heading. And I don't think at the beginning of the process we can answer that question. We won't know that until we know what the system is going to look like. But I just would tell you that in my mind, the skill set is quite a bit different. This is a project management kind of a thing rather than a long-term operator, and somebody that also can work quickly and decisively, among many other things.
Yeah. All good thinking. Okay, Bill, did you have a comment?
Well, I'm just thinking to myself about how to move us forward. And one of the things we've done successfully, in my view, on this board, in my time on the board, is to name and designate a subgroup of the board to take on, whether it's a presidential search or various other tasks, but at the same time to have that group remain open to other involvement and input from board members broadly, so that it becomes an opportunity for others to choose to be involved. I'm thinking off the top of my head, but I'm just thinking we might do well to work from one of our existing committees to be tasked with both naming the qualities and putting a proposal before the full board in an expeditious way, so that about how to move forward more broadly. This has to involve more than just trustees. Ultimately, the input, as Dylan said, there needs to be input from other groups. And one thought is to ask for our executive committee to take this task of defining what it is to bring us a proposal, and to have that executive committee be open to input from other board members, and to have that, and to put some time frame on that for a proposal to come to the full board very soon. I'm just concerned that if we leave here today with nothing suggested, then we have that many more steps to take. And I recognize Karen, I appreciate what Karen's comment is as well, that, to try to stop and think this through more is I'm inclined on that as well. But I think there may be a way to just take a step forward and to allow us to have input and further reflection before a proposal really is before the whole board. There's some few thoughts.
That is precisely why we're having this conversation, and I was hoping that an idea like that might come forward, and appreciate other perspectives on whether to take advantage of one of our existing standing committees to guide us through this, knowing that our committee meetings are always open to other trustees. They're public meetings. And whether it makes sense to capitalize on a pre-existing committee to at least be the core of the board working on this on behalf of everyone. Karen?
I didn't mean to betray thoughtfulness with timeliness. I think we need both. There's obvious urgency. And I don't have a problem with the executive committee being responsible for bringing forward a proposal. And as has been pointed out, the executive committee, as other committees, is open to participation by all members of the board if they want to attend. And this will be a proposal, so the full board, every member has an opportunity to weigh in and adjust it. And I think timeliness is very important. And everybody's responsibility, I would tell you, my life experience tells me that if everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge. So somebody has got to be tasked with it.
One of the good things about Zoom, I can really watch the faces of the committee members, and none of them appear to be weeping. Karen, do you want to make that motion?
I do. I just don't want to have to think to process it.
Or Bill, you were also, maybe it's kinder to ask you.
Well, I would make a motion to charge the executive committee with the task of bringing a proposal to the full board in a very expeditious timeline, a proposal for a search process that involves the active involvement of the 3 points of the triangle, as Church mentioned, and the constituencies, as Dylan's mentioned, and to bring a proposal to the full board for setting in motion the search for what we're calling the long-term interim chancellor.
Okay.
With the understanding that executive committee meeting will be known to all board members, and those who wish to participate are welcome to engage.
We need a date in it.
A date for the
to return to the board.
To return to the board with
Yes.
a proposal. Well, I'll look for some help for others to say how quickly that should happen.
David?
I think we should do it this week.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm partly looking to you all because you all are, I'm asking you all to take it on, and I feel
right.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm speaking up, Bill, because I think if we're going to take it on, we need to do it, and we need to do it quickly. And the only comment, I absolutely agree that we make this open to the full board to participate as they have time and desire.
Yeah.
But what I would say is simply that meeting, we should carve out a time certain, and we should be focused like a laser beam on the task at hand and not go off on tangents. We should get our job done. And if that's the way it goes, I'm more than happy to help.
Perhaps I'd nominate you as the chair of this ad hoc committee.
Could I suggest?
Well, the chair is the chair of the executive.
No, I understand. No, I don't mean to take anything away from Church, but I mean just in terms of sometimes it's good to delegate a specific task.
Could we suggest Monday, so that if we have to do any wordsmithing over the weekend, we could report back a week from today? No later than.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay? Jennifer, can you read a motion back to us, Jennifer? Oh, please be there, Jennifer. Or Sophie, did you hear the motion?
I tried to write it down. So it looked like the motion was to charge the executive committee with the task of bringing a proposal for a search process to the full board of trustees within a short timeline to search for a longer term interim chancellor. And that the executive committee will be open to all board of trustee members and others. So that was, I don't know if I captured it entirely.
All board of trustee members. This is a board.
Yeah.
I'm going to be clear.
Right.
This is for board members.
But when Right, when the executive committee meets, that other board members who are not on the executive committee are welcome to participate in it, was what I was trying to get to, yeah.
Right.
Okay, very good. And this is with the understanding it'll be no later than Monday.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? We have decided. So executive committee, stand by. We can now move, Yasmin, how are we, okay, I'm sorry, Peg?
Church, the motion we just passed, is it there to meet by Monday, or they are to have the report to us to meet?
The latter. The latter.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, because the way it was worded, it was,
No.
So we'll be meeting Monday to hear their report.
It'll either, I don't know if we necessarily will need to call a meeting. Let's cross that bridge when we get a little closer to it, but
Okay.
we'll all receive it no later than then.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, that is good. Yasmin, what is our status for public comment as our remaining agenda items are public comment, any other business coming before the committee, and then we would adjourn. But again, with Zoom, we've kind of established a pattern here. Where do we stand, Yasmin?
Yes, so if people want to make a comment, I have posted now the link to sign up to do that. That's just to try to help us manage things. But I will note that I can also see that Beth Walsh has her hand virtually raised on Zoom. And so I would invite Beth, we will unmute you, Beth, and then as other speakers may wish to sign up, they can do so.
Yes, please do.
All right, thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Beth, how are you?
Great, I'm doing okay, thanks, Church. So my concern, I have a few concerns. My concern is that the executive committee is the committee that actually supported the chancellor in his mistaken efforts to close 3 campuses and caused our 3 campuses to really suffer as far as enrollment goes. And so I really wish you had waited to make any kind of nomination, but not that I'm going to influence you, but that was very troubling to me. And so I'm thinking back on when Chancellor Spalding was chosen and how quickly that was done without any input from any of our campuses. And I really hope that you will do your very best to be inclusive and transparent in the process to hire the long-term interim chancellor and include VSC stakeholders outside of the Board of Trustees. Our voices matter too, as you could tell, because we did change the direction of the chancellor and the executive board's intentions. And I hope that you're going to find someone committed to keeping all of our campuses open and properly funded, and someone that is open to the elimination of the position of chancellor and the central office. So that's what I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
And now up we have Thomas Judd.
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question, and I'm not sure if it would be for the presidents of the college, if they're still on or not, but they mentioned moving some courses more towards CTE. I was just wondering if you could elaborate what CTE stands for.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to address that since
Please do, Pat.
that question came up in my presentation. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education Centers, and it's referring to the 17 centers that provide career and tech ed education for the state, many located at high schools, but I believe all high school students have access to career and technical education. And so the thought there is to try to partner more. There are already great partnerships happening with CTE and a lot of our colleges, but how can we partner more and build those pathways? But also, could those facilities which are located geographically throughout the state, be facilities that Vermont Tech or other VSC colleges could access to provide programming. And that's what we're looking into in a much more robust way, if that answers your question, Thomas.
Thank you, Pat.
It does, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, at this time, there are no other individuals who have requested to make a public comment.
Okay, thank you, Yasmin. We'll then proceed to, is there any other business to come before the board? Sophie, anything from you before we close out the day?
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay. Then hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We're going to adjourn and it's light outside. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Very well. Stay tuned. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, Sophie. Thank your team.